You set a birthday reminder on your phone without thinking twice about it. Another year gone, you barely register it anymore. It just happens quietly in the background of your life, the same way it happened last year and the year before that. But the real answer to what if you were immortal isn't a fantasy where you keep collecting birthdays forever, young and unstoppable. It's far stranger than that, because immortality wouldn't just change how long you live. It would change what kind of creature you are, right down to the cells doing the dividing inside you at this exact moment. Let's start with something most people never think about. Your body isn't actually built to last forever, and that's not an accident. It's a design choice, one made at the cellular level billions of times a day without your permission. In 1961, a biologist named Leonard Hayflick discovered something that reshaped how scientists understood aging. He took human cells, put them in a lab dish, and watched them divide. Split in two, split again, over and over, but not endlessly. Every single cell type he tested stopped dividing after roughly the same number of splits, somewhere around 50. Not 60, not 100. 50, give or take. Scientists now call this the Hayflick limit, and it turns out almost every cell in your body is quietly counting down toward it, right now, whether you notice or not. Here's the mechanism behind that countdown. At the tip of every chromosome inside your cells sits a small protective cap called a telomere. Think of it like the plastic tip on the end of a shoelace, stopping the important part from fraying apart. Every time a cell divides, that telomere gets a tiny bit shorter. Eventually, it gets too short to protect the chromosome any further, and the cell either stops dividing entirely, a state scientists call senescence, or it dies outright. This is why an 80-year-old's cells behave so differently from an 8-year-old's, even under a microscope. The countdown isn't a metaphor. It's a physical clock, ticking down inside almost every part of you. So why would evolution build a body with a built-in expiration date? Wouldn't cells that could divide forever be the obvious winning strategy? Here's where it gets stranger. A cell that divides without limit already has a name in biology. It's called cancer. Telomere shortening isn't a flaw evolution forgot to fix. It's very likely a safety mechanism, a built-in brake that stops damaged or mutated cells from copying themselves into oblivion. Molecular biologist Elizabeth Blackburn, who later won a Nobel Prize for her work on telomeres, helped uncover an enzyme called telomerase, which can actually rebuild those shortened caps and let cells divide indefinitely. Most of your cells barely produce any of it, but cancer cells almost always find a way to switch it back on. The very same mechanism that could make you immortal at the cellular level is the mechanism that, uncontrolled, kills people every single day. Which means the question was never really, can biology defeat aging? It's, what happens to a body that finds a way around that break safely? And it turns out, at least one creature already has. Meet Turritopsis doanei, a jellyfish barely the size of your fingernail, and as far as biologists can tell, the closest thing to a biologically immortal animal on Earth. When this jellyfish is injured, starving, or simply old, it doesn't die the way almost every other animal does. Instead, its cells do something extraordinary. They revert. An adult cell can transform back into an earlier developmental stage, essentially resetting the jellyfish back to its juvenile polyp form, and then it grows up all over again. Japanese marine biologist Shin Kubota has spent years keeping colonies of these jellyfish alive in his lab specifically to study this reversal, and he's watched individual animals cycle through this rebirth dozens of times. Not reincarnation, not metaphor. The exact same organism, biologically resetting its own age, again and again. So here's the counterintuitive twist. Biological immortality already exists in nature. It's not science fiction. It's swimming in the ocean right now. Which means the real barrier to human immortality was never really, is this possible? It's what would actually happen if it happened to something as complex as you. And this is where the story stops being about jellyfish and starts being about naked mole rats. These strange, wrinkled rodents live nearly 10 times longer than a mouse of similar size should, rarely get cancer, and barely show any signs of aging at all, right up until the moment they die. Biologist Rochelle Buffenstein has studied naked mole rat colonies for decades, and one of her most striking findings is that their risk of death doesn't increase with age the way it does in essentially every other mammal on Earth, including you. A 30-year-old naked mole rat is about as likely to die in the next year as a 2-year-old one. Buffenstein's research suggests their bodies have unusually effective mechanisms for repairing damaged proteins and resisting the kind of cellular chaos that drives aging in most other species. They're not immortal, but they're proof that the rulebook you assume applies to every living thing, the one where risk of death climbs steadily the older you get, isn't actually universal. It's a choice biology made for you specifically, not a law of the universe. Now picture it, a version of you that simply doesn't age, no telomere countdown, no senescent cells piling up in your tissues, your body at, say, 35 indefinitely. It sounds like the obvious upgrade, but follow it forward and the picture gets far stranger than eternal youth. Start with your brain. Every memory you've ever formed lives in physical changes to the connections between your neurons, changes that take up actual space and actual energy to maintain. Neuroscientists studying memory formation have long pointed out that the brain doesn't store information the way a hard drive does, with unlimited room for more. It prunes. It forgets. It has to, just to keep functioning efficiently. A brain built to run for centuries wouldn't just remember more. It would eventually have to reckon with a version of the Hayflick limit for memory itself, some ceiling on how much a single continuous identity could hold onto before something has to give. Would you even be the same person at year 300 that you were at year 30? Or would so much have been quietly overwritten that the you reading this sentence would be a stranger to that future self? Then there's the population problem, the one people raise first and dismiss fastest. If death from old age simply stopped, birth rates wouldn't need to change much before resources became the defining conflict of every generation. Not a hypothetical one, an immediate one. Every job would eventually be held by someone who could, in theory, hold it forever. Every parent-child relationship would stretch across centuries instead of decades. Every grudge, every mistake, every relationship would have to be carried indefinitely, because there would be no natural endpoint forcing anyone to let go. Death, as brutal as it sounds, is also the mechanism that clears space for new ideas, new leadership, new versions of how a society could work. Take it away, and you don't just remove an ending. You remove the built-in reset button an entire species has quietly relied on for its entire existence. And here's where the twist reframes everything. The reason the Turritopsis jellyfish can do this, and you can't, isn't that it found a clever workaround to the problems aging solves. It's that it never needed most of those problems solved in the first place. It doesn't hold memories the way you do. It doesn't build relationships across decades. It doesn't need a society that clears space for new generations, because it isn't building complex, interdependent, generation-spanning lives the way humans do. Every trade-off your body makes by aging and eventually dying, the jellyfish simply never needed to make. It got biological immortality by staying simple enough that immortality wouldn't break anything else. Which is really the point. Aging isn't just a flaw your body hasn't fixed yet. It's the specific trade-off that made your particular kind of life possible. A brain that can prune and refine itself instead of drowning in every memory it's ever formed. A society that can hand power and ideas to new generations instead of freezing in place around whoever got there first. Relationships shaped by knowing there's a horizon, not an infinite flat line. Take death away, and you don't just gain more time. You lose the entire structure your species built around the assumption that time runs out. You set a birthday reminder on your phone without thinking twice about it. Another year gone, it still feels like nothing. Now you know it's actually the visible tip of a trade-off older than your species itself. one measured in telomeres, in jellyfish that never truly die, and in mole rats that break every rule you assumed applied to you, standing behind a question you've been quietly answering, birthday after birthday, without ever realizing you were answering it at all.